following program is distributed by the Bears Barroom Radio Network. It's presented live over mixlr.com and later disseminated in podcast format on most delivery platforms. It's intended for all audiences. Never before in the history of sports podcast has one show made this promise. Draft on Tap will report on every college prospect pro scouts are looking at for the 2020 NFL Draft. Every one of them.
Sanders, smothered. Chase Young, another big play.
Montez second and goal. Steps in. Caught. Touchdown. The third passing touchdown of the first half for Steven Montez. There's Johnson. He's got it. Touchdown, Texas. An open man at the 25. A foot race for the tight end. There's that man again. Albert O with his second score. 47 yards.
Draft on Tap with Bears Barroom draft analyst Danny Shimon. Your host, Ryan Badgley. And featuring some of the most respected draft analysts in the country. Grab a beer. We're about to make history.
And making history is what we do on Bears Barroom Radio Network. I'm your host, Ryan Badgley, and welcome to this week's episode of Draft on Tap. We have an exciting show planned for you tonight, so strap on your helmets and let's introduce our Bears Barroom draft analyst, Danny Shimon. Danny, how you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, Badge, man. Feeling great. One week in the books of college football, and what a week it was, man. We had some really exciting games, and we had some duds as well. But I think overall, just good to have football back again.
Yeah, no question about it, Danny. And it was an exciting weekend. We got to watch a lot of college football this weekend, and now. We turn over to week 2, and to that, we have a special guest with us here on Draft on Tap tonight. Before we introduce him, let's tell you a little bit about Kevin McGuire and what he's doing. Kevin McGuire contributes college football content to College Football Talk of NBC Sports, Athlon Sports, and is the college football editor for The Comeback. And he also hosts a podcast called the No 2 Minute Warning Podcast. So, Kevin, welcome to Draft on Tap. How you doing tonight?
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing well. Hopefully you are too. And, I'm excited because the season is finally started. We got a week in the books, and I'm ready for week 2.
Yeah, it was a fantastic first week. And, with that, I'll kick things off with you we'll talk a little bit about quarterback injuries. You pull up ESPN and search quarterbacks, and one of the first things you see is, multiple quarterbacks injured in the first week. Northwestern quarterback TJ Green is out. He's having surgery. It could end his year. You also have Clay Helton from USC, who not only tore his ACL, he tore his meniscus. And then Stanford quarterback KJ Costello is questionable for this week's game at USC. So, Kevin, just some thoughts on the early quarterback injuries and how they may affect those teams going forward.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. First of all, Clay Helton is the head coach of USC. JT Daniels is the quarterback that had the torn ACL. Just a point of clarification real quick.
Oh, yes, correct. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Slip of the tongue. It happens. But I really do feel like, sometimes it's just luck of the draw. We know that injuries are going to happen in football, pro and in college. And when it happens to your quarterback, it can take your season in a spiral real quickly. Or, it can be an opportunity for somebody to step up and maybe save the season. So as far as teams like Stanford and USC are concerned, we could very well get a good glimpse of what to expect out of either of them this weekend when they play. But as far as USC is concerned, I don't know if the loss of Daniels is really going to alter where their season goes, because I still feel like that's a program that's probably going to be, win some, lose some. I don't know if the loss of their quarterback is really going to be the big difference maker for them.
Kevin, besides the injuries, we also saw a lot of sloppy play this weekend. We saw a lot of missed tackles, penalties, misalignments. Do you think a lot of that was due to the fact that there is no true preseason in college football?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the NFL has 4 weeks of preseason, so you can kind of clear up some of the garbage that they're working on in the offseason leading up to the season. But yeah, I think, as long as I've been watching college football, and maybe you guys can agree with this as well, but the first game is generally going to be your most likely one that's going to be a little bit ugly, a little bit sloppy, a lot of miscues. And the old saying is, you're only as good as, or you have a chance to improve the most from week 1 to week 2, because now you have seen all of your faults on actual game film that you can go back. It's not something you look at in practice. Now you're seeing it against another opponent, and maybe an opponent exposes some weaknesses that maybe you weren't really concentrating on before. So I think that's always been the case for college football, and the lack of the preseason probably hurts that.
Having said that, we saw some terrific games. That Northern Iowa State game was phenomenal. Obviously, Oregon, Auburn was great. And then that one game I want to touch base with you is Boise State and Florida State. So, besides Florida State and Tennessee losing, were those two outcomes the biggest shocker of the past weekend for you?
Probably, because overall, I don't think there was a whole lot of shocking developments as far as the final scores were concerned. Boise State beating Florida State, I don't think is that out of the question because of where those two programs are right now. Tennessee losing at home, though, maybe the Tennessee job was a little bit more of a rebuild than a lot of people were anticipating, because losing to a Georgia State team that won just 2 games last year and has really been in existence for only a handful of seasons, that's kind of the latest low point for a program that continues to find new low points. So you kind of wonder where they go from there. So that was definitely eyebrow raising, I'll say. I don't know if necessarily I want to go shocking, but it was probably one of the more unsettling results I think we saw from a lot of college football teams this weekend.
The other thing that we saw was, we had those 3 high-profile transfer quarterbacks, if you will, coming out of the gates playing well in week 1 with, Jalen Hurts over in Oklahoma, Jacob Eason at Washington, and then Justin Fields at Ohio State. Which performance impressed you the most, and which player you think has the best chance to sustain it over the course of the season?
Yeah, they all had great debuts. There's no question about that. For me, it's got to be Jalen Hurts with what he did at Oklahoma. I kind of expected that this was a really good situation for him going from Alabama, where people kind of forget how successful he actually was at Alabama before, Tagovailoa took over the job. But this is a very accomplished quarterback, and now going to a program like Oklahoma that opens things up so much offensively, and what they've done the last couple of years with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray under first-time head coach Lincoln Riley. I mean, he's got a chance now to go 3 for 3 for Heisman quarterbacks, all of his transfers, by the way, which would be fascinating on so many levels. And my biggest question is, like you just asked, is it sustainable? I think it may be. I don't know if we'll see quite that performance and output on a week-to-week basis, but I think over the course of the season, against most of the teams, Jalen Hurts is going to have a lot of opportunities to rack up some big points and big yards.
Yeah, last week I revealed my top 10 quarterbacks, preseason quarterback listing, and Jalen Hurts made the top 10. And I was being, asked on Twitter, Jalen Hurts, really? I'm like, listen, Lincoln Riley has some sort of magic dust over there at Oklahoma. I mean, if he can make Baker Mayfield a first pick in the draft, Kyler Murray a first pick in the draft, God knows what he can do with Jalen Hurts. And this past week, again, small sample size, just 1 game. But, man, he looked like a totally different Jalen Hurts. We had not seen that type of player at Alabama at all.
No, yeah, you're exactly right. And, of course, they do play different systems at Alabama compared to Oklahoma, so you kind of expect that there's going to be some difference in the stats. But, like I said, he was a very successful quarterback at Alabama. He was the starting quarterback the year they went to the national championship game and lost to Clemson. And then he was the starting quarterback for the majority of the season when they beat Georgia in the national championship game. Of course, they make the halftime switch because he wasn't performing so well. But he was the quarterback for a lot of wins. So I'm not ready to say that he's the Heisman frontrunner, but he certainly got off to a really good start, and it's always nice to see. Is he going to be the number 1 pick? Well, we've got months to figure that one out, but it's certainly a good start for him, and I was happy to see it.
And again, it's only 1 game, but this Bo Nix kid looks really like he has a chance to be a really good player. Do you think he's good enough to remove head coach Gus Malzahn off the hot seat that he seems to be annually on every year? It seems like they want to get rid of him over there in Auburn, but this kid, if he's special the way he looks, again, just one game. If he's this special, he could finally have his quarterback of the future there.
Yeah, obviously, small sample size. I hate to overreact too much, but it was good to see Bo Nix kind of grow up because he took a beating at times, and I think you saw, he wasn't going to lose his poise. He certainly didn't lack any confidence when his team needed him the most at the end of the game, and maybe Oregon kind of let Auburn hang around a little bit too much, but when you got a quarterback who's going to make some plays, that's always a nice asset to have. Does this turn Auburn into certainly a team to watch? Obviously, they went up in the rankings, but they still have a brutal schedule this year. So we'll see if that can continue as the season progresses, because it's not going to be easy for Auburn at times this year.
Yeah, Kevin, the next question I had for you, and it goes back to injuries again, and one of the big ones for me was Wisconsin right tackle Logan Bruss getting injured, and how that's going to affect Jonathan Taylor, this week and going forward, depending on how long he's out. They have a big matchup coming up, I think, week 4 with Michigan, right? I think that's what I read today. Is that a big impact injury for Jonathan Taylor, or is it not that big of a deal?
I don't want to say that losing one of your starting offensive linemen isn't a big deal, but I think when you look at Wisconsin, the way that they have developed their offensive linemen over the years, I still think that they'll be okay. And as far as Jonathan Taylor is concerned, I don't think this is going to diminish his rushing output by any stretch of the imagination. He's still going to pile up a lot of yards because he's going to be behind still a pretty solid offensive line. So that's the one thing you can have faith in Wisconsin. Will it hurt a little bit? Yeah, probably, especially against teams like Michigan. They have, I believe they have to play Ohio State too. I could be wrong with it, but I think they play Ohio State too and Michigan State. So, those are teams that could expose that weakness a little bit more than some of the teams are going to play in their division.
And it's sticking on the running back, talk, like the early season Heisman favorites, predominantly were the quarterbacks, the Tuas, the Sam Ellingers, Jalen Hurts, so on and so forth. However, having seen some of the week 1 output by the nation's top running backs, is there a shot you think a running back might take home the Heisman this season?
I think we're probably due for another running back to win the Heisman, but I still think this is a quarterback award first, and you have to have a really stellar season at the running back position to kind of elevate yourself ahead of any of these quarterbacks that we're probably going to be talking about all season long. We've reached a point now where some running backs can run for 2,000 yards. It's not a gimme that they're going to win the Heisman because of the way that the game is played these days. And I think there's just so much attention put on those quarterbacks. Unless all these quarterbacks start going down a path of mediocrity, which I don't think anyone can honestly predict, and some running back takes advantage of that, I think the odds are stacked against a running back. Not impossible, but it's just not something I see likely to happen.
Staying with my Jonathan Taylor question, we had a question in the chat for you as well, Kevin. How high do you think Jonathan Taylor will go when he declares for the draft?
Yeah, I think when you talk about the running backs that are going to be in the draft, I think he'll certainly be one of the top running backs, if not the top running back. I honestly don't know what teams need the drafting of a running back going into next year. Obviously, we still have to see what happens in the NFL season. So I don't know exactly where I would put him in the first round, but he's got to be, I would think, a first round. I know the running back position has been kind of devalued as far as the draft is concerned these last few years, but I think he's got first round talent and potential, and probably upper first round if things go well this season. He had some problems fumbling the football a little bit last year, so that's certainly something that scouts are going to pay attention to closer this year. And if he can shore that up a little bit and still put up the yardage that I anticipate he's going to, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be one of your 1 or 2 top running backs on the draft board next year.
And we want to thank Vic Valenti in the chat for that question. And, I'll follow that up with Danny. Danny just mentioned he shared his top 10 quarterbacks last week. Off the top of your head, Kevin, are there quarterbacks that the national media is not talking about that you'd like our listeners to know more about?
Yeah, I don't know as far as what their NFL futures are concerned, but one of the guys I'm certainly going to be watching this year is Kellen Mond at Texas A&M. And I think that's mostly because I'm kind of anticipating something big to happen with Texas A&M this season. Not to say that they're going to dethrone Alabama or anything like that, but maybe second best team in the SEC West. And I think he's going to be a big reason why. Now, this weekend, he's going in on the road against Clemson. So it's a big challenge for him right off the bat here in week 2. And I think if he's going to have the kind of season that I'm thinking that he could. I think he puts on a good show against a solid defensive team in Clemson. Again, doesn't necessarily mean that I think he's going to lead them to victory, but I want to see what he's made of this weekend. If he can perform well and admirably, I think he's going to have a pretty big year.
Yeah, Mon just missed my top 10, but I definitely like him in that Jumbo Fisher offense, with that ability as a dual threat, runner, passer. And like I said, this week against Clemson, again, if I don't expect him to necessarily beat Clemson, but if he puts up a good effort, a good game. I mean, last year he had a pretty good game against Clemson. So if he repeats last year's effort, I think Mon will start elevating himself in terms of stock, towards draft prospects and NFL scouts. But yeah, I agree. Kellen Mond just missed my top 10 list. That's a good name to throw out there. Kevin, Brian Kelly and Notre Dame pulled out a victory over Louisville, but it was far from pretty. So, they came in ranked 9th in the country, and I think they moved up one spot to 8th this week. Having watched them play, even have watched some of their spring practice, do you think Notre Dame's overrated?
They may be, and I think certainly they took advantage of their schedule last year, and they were able to run the table, and they deserve to be in the playoff as far as I'm concerned. This year, certainly, I don't think they're going to run the table. And I think what we saw against Louisville is probably an indication that they may take a little bit of a step back, and they may cost them at some point. So are they overrated? Yeah, they may be. But I think the problem here is, just within the top 10, we have 2 top teams that are clearly Clemson and Alabama, whatever order you want to put in. Maybe Georgia's in that mix too, maybe Oklahoma. After that, it starts to get a little bit closer because there's a lot of teams that are good, maybe not great, and I think you're starting to throw Notre Dame into that territory towards the bottom of the top 10. So they may be there until they until they lose a game when they start to get hit hard, and maybe some other teams are kind of showing what they're made of this season.
Yeah, I just think from last year to this year, I expected a bigger jump. Again, we've talked about small sample size, just one game, but Ian Book just didn't look right. He didn't look comfortable. Now, he lost a big weapon to the NFL, and Boykins, a receiver, and one of his tight ends. So I don't know if he's still getting adjusted, but Chase Claypool still a weapon. And I know today you reported they lost one of the running backs, Armstrong, I believe, right? He's going to be out for a while.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to be out anywhere between, I think the report I saw was 5 weeks to up to 2 months. So it's kind of up in the air, but he's not going to be playing anytime soon. So that'll definitely hurt. No, I think one thing we also need to just keep in mind is Notre Dame was playing on the road against a Louisville team that is starting a new era with a new head coach, new mentality, a little bit of energy in the building, certainly in that first quarter. But the defense eventually clamp down a little bit, and I think that's what you can rely on with Notre Dame. So the defense will keep them in a lot of games and give them a chance to win. But yeah, I think offensively they're going to need a little bit of help. And as you've seen, just in the playoff last year, the offense is something that is going to be good to win games, but it's not going to be great to win a championship.
Kevin, I wanted to ask you about Jake Haener transferring from Washington, to Fresno State. He enrolled there Tuesday and has joined the team. Lost out on the starting job to Jason Eason earlier on, and just want to get your thoughts on the move to go back and now basically take that job.
Yeah, I just saw that too, and it's Fresno State's a good program, and you got Jeff Tedford there coaching them up. So Jeff Tedford knows how to coach quarterbacks. So I think that's certainly something that you can look forward to. How quickly he gets involved and becomes a factor with his offense, I'm not entirely sure. But this is certainly it's not a bad spot to be in because Fresno State's one of the better teams in that Mountain West Conference. So you're going to get some good coaching, get some good opportunities, and I think it's a good situation for any quarterback to be in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see for sure. And, I know Danny has another question for you here, and I'll pass it over to him.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to this weekend's game. You touched base a little bit on one of the games that I highlighted, which was the Texas A&M Clemson game. The other one, obviously, the big one is LSU at Texas. Are there other games that you're most looking forward to watching this weekend or possibly even covering?
Well, those are the 2 biggest on my agenda. I'm kind of curious about the Cincinnati-Ohio State game, and at the same time, Army and Michigan, we saw Army go into Oklahoma last year and take the Sooners into overtime last year. If they can give Michigan a similar scare, I think that'd be pretty fun to watch. But the Cincinnati-Ohio State game, to me, is going to be pretty interesting because, a lot of people like Cincinnati this year to maybe dethrone UCF. And I like to follow that group of five stuff to find another layer of enjoying college football. So I really like seeing these group of five programs get their opportunities. I don't know if they're going to take advantage of it against Ohio State, though, because I think that Ohio State's a really good team. So those are a couple games that I'm going to throw on my radar, too. But, yeah, like you said, Texas A&M and Clemson and LSU, Texas are clearly the showcases this weekend, which is going to be a lot of fun.
That Cincinnati game, by the way, has one of my top 10, spoiler alert here, my top 10 running backs, Michael Warren II, going up against that Buckeye defense. That's a huge test for him, a nice proving ground, if you will, to showcase his talents in front of the NFL scouts.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ohio State had some problems with the defense last year. So if they are, still a little bit vulnerable, you could absolutely be looking at a pretty decent afternoon, which would be great. I think Ohio State has some work to do. They're still, in my mind, the best team in the Big Ten, but they're not without their flaws. So if Cincinnati can get ready for this one, that'd be pretty interesting.
Before we let you go, Kevin, we want to, we thank you for your time, but I wanted one of the games that I'm really going to be paying attention to. So I'm a diehard SU fan, and they're playing Maryland this weekend. Maryland put up 79 points last week, and Syracuse kind of struggled against Liberty. Just your thoughts on, that matchup for the Orange coming in is ranked, and I don't think this is going to be a walk in the park for them.
No, I don't think so either. And I know if you watch the lines on this one, Syracuse opened up as a couple-point favorite, and now that line is favoring Maryland. So that tells me something. People are buying into a little bit what Maryland has as far as kind of getting a new energy under Mike Locksley. I still like Syracuse overall, though. I think we get kind of carried away because Maryland put up 79 points against an FCS team that isn't all that great. So I still think Syracuse is the better play here, and I think that Syracuse is going to show that they're the better team. But I do think that they're going to be in for a battle. I think Maryland is going to have some good energy, and that'll keep them in there for a while. But I do think at some point Syracuse will find a couple more plays than Maryland does, and Syracuse probably goes home with the win there.
To follow up with that, your thoughts on Tommy DeVito? I went to the SU spring game, and obviously it's kind of real football, but DeVito, to me, last year when he came in, when Dungy got hurt, I thought, holy cow, we've got a quarterback for the next 3 years that, really looked very good in those situations. And in the spring game, I left feeling, not as happy as I was seeing him last season. Do you see this being a growth year for him instead of him really taking over and leading that offense?
Yeah, I think maybe he'll get better as the season goes along and he gets more familiar with how Dino Babers is running the offense the way that he likes. But yeah, I'm with you. I think certainly it's a little less encouraging at the start of the year and after the spring performance because there is certainly room for growth. But let's not get too carried away because not every young quarterback is going to step in and be a star right away. So I do think that if you just trust that, the way that they're building this offense with Dino Babers, I think he's going to be okay. But I think this is a good test this weekend to go on the road against Maryland. Again, a team that's going to be pretty feisty. But I still think that this is an opportunity to kind of shake off some of the rust that you saw last week against Liberty and protect them a little bit better too. And I think that they'll be okay. So it could be a year of growth, and we'll see where he is at the end of the year, and maybe we feel differently about him going into his junior year.
Yeah, and I definitely think you hit the nail on the head. It's this matchup will be good for them because next week Clemson comes to the Dome.
Yeah,
and that's the last few years those games have been amazing. So I kind of like that they're going to get tested before Clemson comes in.
Yeah, and I think it's good to get one more test in before Clemson does come in because I do think, I think that's going to be a real fun game because it is at Syracuse and, they gave them a battle last year too. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, again, Clemson is clearly the best team in the ACC. But if any team's going to give them trouble on their schedule, I look at Clemson's schedule, and I think they're in their toughest part of the schedule right now because they have Texas A&M this weekend, and of course the road trip to Syracuse, which you can't take for granted. Obviously, you got to keep Trevor Lawrence healthy. That'll be a big key for Clemson next week. But that should be this is a good couple of weeks for Syracuse to kind of see where they are. Again, not throwing them in the ACC championship mix yet because because Clemson is there. But,
yep, absolutely.
But you hear what I'm saying. Like, this is a program that's heading in the right direction. I don't know if they'll get to 10 wins again this season, but I certainly feel positive about where this program is moving.
Well, Kevin, we want to thank you for your time, man, and we'd like you to go ahead and let everybody know what you've got going on and how they can find you and where you're doing stuff, and if you've got websites, your Twitter handle, anything you can share, please do.
Well, I do have lots of websites, but I'm going to keep it simple for you guys. First of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on. This was a pleasure. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. But if you're on the Twitter machine, look me up on Twitter at KevinOnCFB. I share links to all my stuff all over the place, because I'm on NBC Sports, I'm on Athlon Sports, I've got my own Patreon, I'm on blog, podcast, all that good stuff. But I share all the links right there on Twitter, so I keep it simple for everybody. Got a lot of stuff, of course, looking forward to this coming weekend. Lots of recaps and analysis and a lot of fun stuff on the Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff.
Again, we thank you for your time, Kevin. We had a blast with you, man. We can't thank you enough, and we definitely look forward to doing it again with you down the road.
Yeah, Kevin, really do appreciate you taking some time out for us tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Well, Danny, I mean, what a great way to kick off this week with Kevin McGuire. We had a blast with him tonight, and talked a lot about the Orange. I'm really riding that wave and looking forward to next week, Danny. And I
got a good team. I think they're gonna be good. And I told you they already have 2 NFL pass rushers, in my opinion.
No question about it. And I wanted to ask you, because we talked about Alton Robinson last week, and I had mentioned to you when we talked yesterday that he, as far as his rush game, he didn't get to the quarterback, but he played very well in the run game, which I know a lot of people weren't very happy with his how he played in the run game. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was Kendall Coleman. So right. Kendall Coleman had 2 sacks last week, played very well. But first I'd like to hear your thoughts on Alton Robinson and where he can improve in the run game.
Well, I mean, from what I'd studied on Robinson so far, heading into this season, I think he's, definitely in terms of point of attack, point of contact, being able to stack and shed and be able to, take on multiple blockers. So that's an area where he's got to improve on. Just added strength, But in terms of, his forte right now is pass rush. His ability to get to the quarterback is what he does best. And I think, he'll be drawing more attention. You'll see Kendall Coleman on the other side kind of, benefit from that, reap the benefits of that. So, but definitely is an area that if I had to, downgrade Robinson would probably be the run game. Not that he's horrible at it, but just get a little bit bigger, get a little more stout at the point of attack. But in terms of, him being, the focal point of a offensive, coordinator, being able to block him and being able to make sure you have people over there to control his pass rush, that will consume probably multiple blockers and then give Coleman on the opposite side the opportunity, like you said last week, to have 2 sacks. So, they're both, to me, they're both definitely NFL pass rushers. Some even see Robinson's possibly a stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker. I see him more as a base end kind of guy. But I think Coleman could probably do some more outside linebacker stuff, some standing up, some dropping back into space, as well as put his hand in the ground too. So 2 very talented pass rushers, leading that defense for Dino Babers. So I definitely think that game is it next week with Clemson. I think that's going to be a must watch.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough. I'm going to get to be there in person, and College game day is going to be there, so we're heading up fairly early. Doing the whole tailgate thing, and I'm excited to really see them. I want them to take it right to Clemson. I'd love to see them walk away with a huge win. But enough about the Orange. This week we're talking running backs, Danny, and one of my favorite positions to watch on the field. I just think running backs are, you've got receivers that are super athletic, but to me, there's nothing like a super athletic running back. And I'm really excited to talk your top 10 running backs for this week. And, I kind of want to start things off right with your number one. And this guy had a week last week, week 1, 16 carries, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns in the rush game. He had 2 catches for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. And that is Wisconsin running back Jonathan Taylor. Love to hear what you have to say about Jonathan Taylor, Danny.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just the whole class itself. I mean, there's a ton of talented running backs in this upcoming draft class, and I mean, I really towards the end of it, I had to kind of pick and choose who I was going to include here. But again, just want to let everybody know these are my preseason rankings. So these the first game these guys had last week really didn't go into consideration because I pretty much had this all played out already. So, but Jonathan Taylor, the word I have here is workhorse back. It's funny how the day Ezekiel Elliott gets his big contract, we're talking running backs, but I think this is the next in line of talented Wisconsin running backs. I mean, this kid, like I said, workhorse running back. This kid was a star the minute he stepped on foot on the Badgers campus. He's rushed for over 4,000 yards in just 27 games, already 5th all time in school history in terms of his rushing achievements. When you look at his tape, you look at his traits. The thing that sticks out to me is his patience. His ability to weave in and out of creases, to follow his blockers. He's got very good play speed. I like his play strength, his ability to take on blockers and to be able to break arm tackles. His contact power, meaning that he can keep his feet and his balance through contact. This kid makes a living running in between the tackles. A lot of times a true telltale in terms of projecting running backs college running backs to the next level is their ability to gain yards and make people miss within a tackle box from between the right tackle and the left tackle. A lot of these kids are athletic. These running backs in college are athletic, and they have the speed to be able to get the outside edge on college defensive ends, on college outside linebackers. But when they get to the pros, that corner isn't as easy to turn. So you got to be able to make a living in between the tackles, and that's one thing I key on when I kind of look to project running backs towards the next level. And this kid, Jonathan Taylor, makes a living, like I said, in between that tackle box. His ability to be able to get through that first level, and then he's got that second gear in terms of speed to be able to pull away and just run away from defenders. He recorded last season. He recorded multiple 80-yard runs in the same season. He was the only FBS player to do so. So that tells you the type of big play potential, the ability not only to get the tough 1 or 2 yards, but also be able to break through into the defense's second and third levels, get the angle, or even if the corner or defensive back has an angle on him, he's got that speed, that second gear to be able to make that angle or that advantage moot point for that defender and be able to take the ball to the house. We saw last week he had 2 huge runs. Yeah. He had a huge catch for a touchdown as well. So he, the one negative. It's funny because we said he had 2 catches for I think 48 yards and one was a touchdown. That's the one area where I don't see him as involved at Wisconsin as the passing game. I think he only had 8 receptions last year, like some ridiculous single digit in terms of pass catches last season. So I do want to see him get more involved in that. In terms of dump offs and screens, he seems to be a natural catcher in terms of, reeling the ball in and all that stuff. But I do want to see him get a little bit more involved this season in the passing game. And he's off to a good start, if we base it on last week's game.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, you look at the NFL now, and I mean, they're using the running backs in the pass game more now than ever, really. So I totally agree with you, Danny. That's something that, having single digits in catches last year, a good start to this season for him. Just a couple other little notes that I found and I found this to be amazing. So he's Wisconsin's 4th Doak Walker Award winner. And the names that he joined winning this award, Ron Dane, Monty Ball, and Melvin Gordon, not so much Monty Ball, but Ron Dane and Melvin Gordon really stand out to me. Gordon, obviously, we won't see him week 1 with the Chargers as he's holding out, but those names really stuck out to me. And I mean, you mentioned it, Danny. So I mean, he's a junior now, but through his sophomore season, 4,171 rushing yards, and it's the third highest 2-year rushing total from a player in FBS history, trailing only Melvin Gordon and Iowa State's Troy Davis, and Troy Davis did that 95-96. So number one on your list of top 10 running backs for your preseason list, Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. As we move on the list to number 2, this guy, I'm going to get to see him live next week, Travis Etienne. What a game he had as well. Only had 12 carries, but in those 12 carries, he rushed for 207 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he had 1 catch for 3 yards. A big week 1 for Travis Etienne. And Danny, your thoughts on Travis Etienne?
Yeah, he made the most of his carries, didn't he?
Oh, without a doubt, man. Holy cow.
Yeah, but I mean, here with Etienne, what we're talking about home run hitter. I mean, I have it here on my notes. Big play potential every time he touches the ball, and that's the thing with this kid. He's got a skinny frame, a slight frame, if you will. He's added more muscle, I believe, this season. But what he does, what I like, and when I noted in his traits here, is I love the way he gets skinny in between blockers, meaning he kind of slips in between the cracks there, and then when he gets through, he's got those afterburners to be able to take the run to the house. He can easily bounce a run to the outside. Another one who I love his contact balance, his ability to maintain his balance and speed, through tackle attempts is very, very obvious when you watch him on tape. The one thing that you notice, or the one thing I should say that I kind of jotted down about Etienne that it kind of caught me as some question marks. Let's say I don't want to put him down as negatives. I just want to say more so question marks where he's more quick-footed, and then what he doesn't have is that bounce in his step. So like what I mean by that is he doesn't pop in and out of holes. The type of bounce I expected to see when I
Sure.
kind of broke his tape down. So he's more of a outrun you than make you miss runner. So what that means is, instead of making someone miss at the second and third level by juking them, he'll more use his straight line speed and be able to outrun them to that point. Like you said earlier, if they have a great angle, he'll outrun that angle and get by them and use that speed to kind of, get by the defenders as opposed to juke and be more elusive in the open field. So, again, we're just things that I like to see him kind of develop and work on. But in terms of a big play potential waiting to happen, Travis Etienne is definitely the guy. When I was researching him, a note that I found, he was actually committed initially to Texas A&M. And he kept waiting for Clemson to come and offer him, and Clemson never did. And then finally, I guess a recruit decommitted from Clemson, and then Clemson went back, and then he decommitted from A&M, and then ended up going to Clemson. And then that kid who decommitted from Clemson ended up going to A&M. So it's funny how the world turns around here. But yeah, it was kind of but he definitely wanted to go to Clemson, and he's tailor-made for that system. His ability, his speed, like I said, he had 12 carries last week and had over 200 yards. So he's that big play waiting to happen.
And one of the things I noticed, how fast he is, I felt like watching him last week, it took him a little bit to get up to speed. Maybe it was, my TV, but, he had a long run, and I thought, boy, it seems like he should be moving faster by this point. Obviously, he eventually turned it on, and, just his speed is amazing. And one of the notes that I found entering this season, he had 311 career carries for 2,424 yards and 37 rushing touchdowns. He has 17 career receptions for 135 yards with only 2 receiving touchdowns. One of the things, Danny, is I went through the list here, your top 10 backs, is you don't see a lot of these backs getting a lot of receptions out of the backfield. And we just talked on it with Jonathan Taylor. They get to that next level. You want to see them, it seems like Wisconsin's kind of got a little bit more of a focus on that with Taylor. Do you see Clemson kind of focus getting the ball to ATN out of the backfield a little bit more, or are they really going to just focus with him in the run game?
For now, with ETN, that focus is strictly on the run game. I mean, they have some talented receivers on the outside as well. So I think that's why you don't see ETN as involved in the run game. But if you ever see him, catch a screen, and what you want to see from this guy is he natural in terms of catching the ball? Is he fighting the ball? Is he bobbling? Is he double catching it? If he catches it nicely and he quickly turns upfield, that's what you want to see. You can only go and grade the player on what he is asked to do. If he is not asked to run routes or do something in a certain offense, that's just not it. But he got to be able to show, the brief, times where he has given an opportunity to make a catch or, to make a big play in the passing game. Does he come through? And that's all you can go by. But I think with Clemson's offense, he's not really utilized in that way, in that manner. But we'll get to my list, and we'll get to other running backs that we'll see being utilized in a different way, and you'll see those guys have the numbers in the passing game where you can say, all right, this guy's a dual threat.
Okay, so next on that list is DeAndre Swift out of Georgia. His week 1, he had 16 carries, 152 yards, no touchdowns, and he had no catches. So a decent game on the ground, didn't get into the end zone. Your thoughts on DeAndre Swift, Danny?
Yeah, the more I watch Swift, the more I love the player. I mean, he's not a big guy, but he's got that short frame with a thick build, but he's got super quick feet. He's got that first step explosion. The way, you see him get through the line of scrimmage and into the defensive second level is rare and special. He's got that one cut and accelerate ability without needing to slow down. What I mean is, a lot of times when you see runners make these cuts, they tend to pitter patter their feet and kind of slow down to kind of gather themselves and cut, and then to be able to accelerate again. With Swift, it's just one straight movement: cut, plant, go. And he's a guy that has as well that home run speed. You see him breaking 20, 30, 40, 50-yard runs. I love the way he gets into the second level, and he sets up a defender with head and shoulder movements, getting them leaning one way and then using that cutting ability and that explosion, that quickness to be able to then get the leverage and either whether inside or outside and get more yards. This guy's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. He has, soft hands. He's got 32 receptions last year, or he had 32 receptions last year for 3 touchdowns. So, you can see him excelling in the screen game. You see him, dump offs and all that stuff. He's pretty special with the ball in his hand. So, and this kid, we were talking earlier about making a living in between the tackles. This kid is equally effective running in between the tackles or bouncing it to the outside. And like I said, again, he's got that home run speed, and anytime he gets the ball in the open field, he's got a chance to take it all the way. So, but the one thing about him though, when you kind of project him towards the next level again. Can he be a one-man show in the NFL? He's only about 5'8", 210 is my guesstimate. He split carries with other runners at Georgia. So he's never had more than 17 carries in a game at Georgia. So those are the question marks. Those are really the only question marks I have about him. But in terms of explosiveness, in terms of the cutting ability, vision, the kid has everything, and he's got the hands too. So whether he's a bell cow, carry the ball 25 or 30 times in the NFL. I doubt, if I had to guess right now, but he's definitely going to be a very successful part of a committee, if you will, at the next level.
And you look at his preseason honors. So he was named to the preseason watch list for the Maxwell Award, the Doak Walker Award, the Walter Camp Player of the Year, the Sporting News preseason All-America second team, the Athlon Sports preseason All-America second team, Sports Illustrated preseason All-America second team, the CBS Sports preseason All-America second team, and the preseason All-SEC first team offense. That one by the media. So, obviously a lot of other people, Danny, feel just as passionately about DeAndre Swift as you do.
The one other thing that just to keep in mind, he led the team last year with over 1,000 yards and only 163 rushing attempts.
Yeah, and 10 touchdowns.
Yeah, and he's only made 5 starts, so it's not like he's a full-time starter. Like I said, he was splitting the carries in the backfield with Elijah Holyfield and as well as Brian Herron. So he's never been a carry the load kind of back. So obviously Holyfield has moved on to the NFL, and Herron's still there. And there's another kid that redshirted last year that I think Cook is his last name. He's also splitting some carries. But I want to see if Swift can get those carries up, past the 17 marker. Can he get 20, 22? It doesn't have necessarily be 30 carries a game. You don't have to run him into the ground, but give me to the point where he's got, like, say, 20, almost averaging 20, carries a game. Then we can see if this kid can go ahead and continue growing in his game to the next level.
So we move on to number 4, and that is Zach Moss from Utah. 29 carries, 187 yards, and 1 touchdown, 2 catches for 7 yards. And, Danny, I got to be honest, when I was looking him up, I thought to myself, boy, why hadn't I seen anything on this guy? But, being an ACC guy, I don't get to see much of teams out on the West Coast. So would love to hear, what you think of Zach Moss and being at number 4 on your preseason list, you think obviously very highly of him.
Oh, yeah. This kid just might be the more underrated running back in the entire nation. And you just hit on a great point there, Badge. He plays out in Utah, plays in the Pac-12. A lot of the Midwest and East Coast, fans haven't got a chance to see him yet. Unless you're an NFL scout or a draft analyst or even avid college football fan, you probably never heard the name Zach Moss. But once you put his tape on and you watch Utah, and they have a pretty good team this year, so they hopefully will be on a lot of more national spotlight, TV games. You can definitely pinpoint this guy, and you can definitely find him. Now, another guy that's short and powerful, 5'7" to 5'8" is my guess, about 215 pounds. He too has that stop and go ability. Plus, for a guy that's a power runner, he's got really good change of direction. He's got that, very good foot quickness, lateral agility. He's got that burst that we talked about earlier with DeAndre Swift to be able to get through that first and second level. He doesn't have that type of burst, but he's got very good burst as well. So him too, I love his patience. I love his vision. He does a nice job of hiding behind his blockers, waiting for that crease to develop, and then he'll explode right through it. We talked about contact balance. This kid will not go down with the first hit. You continuously see defenders, flailing out of his feet, and he's just jumping over them, or he's straight up, stiff arming them into the ground and just, continuing on his run. So his yards after contact are very impressive. Again, the one thing about him, or the main thing about him that really I think will or might knock him down when it comes to draft time is durability, to be honest with you. He's only had 1 healthy season. I mean, he's missed games in 2016. He missed the tail end of last season with a knee injury. So, he's got, like I said, that small frame between 5'7" and 5'8". But if he can beat that durability bug, if he can start showing teams and scouts that he can stay healthy, this kid is a very, very talented runner, very productive, and he plays in a very competitive conference that it might not be the SEC, but it definitely has some very talented athletes in it. And you watch him run, you watch him play. And even in terms of the passing game, he's a very natural hands catcher. He had 29 receptions last season, so he's a guy that definitely I feel like the more people watch him, the more people will just understand what type of special talent Utah has there in the backfield.
Now, was he was the player that a lot of I want to say media folks thought he should have came out last year, even though he was hurt, and now he's back for his senior season. Am I right?
So
okay,
yeah, he played 9 games, and as a matter of fact, only played 9 games, but still was given second team All Pac-10 by the coaches. So that's the type of value and the type of talent they see in him. So yeah, he only played 9 games. Some had said that if he did come out last year, there was a chance that he was going to probably make the bottom end of the first round, second round, but he definitely wanted to come back and apparently have another full healthy season and maybe shoot his stock up to that second round to that first round area. But like I said, durability and size are the main questions with him. When you put on the tape, you can see him carrying the load. You can see him being a man that carries the offense. So, if he can continue that and just continue to stay healthy, hopefully, trending upwards and going towards the NFL, I think this is a kid that has a chance to be a very, very talented running back.
Yeah, definitely a guy I want to keep my eye on as the year goes forward, for sure. Moving on, as we round out the top 5, we have Keyshawn Vaughn from Vanderbilt, who his first week he had 15 carries for 78 yards, no touchdowns, 3 catches, 24 yards, and no touchdowns. Your thoughts on Keyshawn Vaughn, Danny?
Yeah, this guy's a former Fighting Illini. He played 2 seasons at Illinois. He had 8 starts with a little over 1,000 yards in those 2 seasons and 9 touchdowns. Transferred to Vanderbilt last year was his first year, and he had, I think, over 1,200 yards, which was second most rushing yards in school history. This kid is about 5'9", 5'10", so he's got a bit of a he's a little bit bigger in terms of if you compare him to Moss and Swift. However, he's a little bit slender frame, but this kid's got super quick feet. He can string together multiple cuts on a single run. He explodes through the line of scrimmage. He's got a second gear. If you just put on the bowl game against Baylor last year, he had 243 yards and he had 2 monster long runs. So you talk about a home run hitter. This kid has it. And what I think about him is he too has a knack, has a feel for blocking, for setting them up. Meaning his blocker. So he can alter his route or his path depending on how the blocking is going. So if a lineman in front of him, if the run's supposed to go to the right and the lineman swings the guy over to the left, he has no problem adjusting his path. So I like that ability downfield to be able to get through. And again, once he hits a crease, he sees it, he's gone. So another big play potential here.
Yeah, and looking at his preseason award watch list, the Doak Walker Award, preseason All-American second team, all-purpose for Athlon Sports, preseason All-SEC first team, also from Athlon Sports, preseason All-SEC first team from Lindy's, preseason All-SEC second team from the SEC Media Days ballot. And I just want to go over his numbers from last year too, Danny. 12 games. He had 1,244 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns on 157 carries, which is the second most single-season rushing yards in Vanderbilt history. He averaged 103.7 rushing yards per game. So a lot of potential.
He had 6 rushes of 60-plus yards. Wow. So that shows the type of big play potential he's got.
And he had 13 receptions for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns as well, including a 75-yarder. So obviously, potential in the pass game as well. Moving on, number 6 on the list, Eno Benjamin out of Arizona State. His week 1 tally, 22 carries, 102 yards, 3 catches, 32 yards, and 1 touchdown. Your thoughts on Eno?
Again, continuing with this trend of stocky, shorter, powerful runners, Benjamin falls right into that area. Again, 197. I estimate about 200 pounds. Powerful frame. This guy is very, very good. After contact, his contact balance is probably one of the best in FBS. I saw a stat where I believe he had 972 yards after contact. So that shows you that the ability he has to be able to absorb hitting and be able to just bounce off of it, bounce off defenders, and continue onto his path. He's got that good lateral agility to be able to sidestep defenders at the line of scrimmage. He can bounce in and out of the gap, so he's got that bounce in his legs that I do like to see, especially for runners that are going to be, mainly staying, within the tackle-to-tackle box there. I like the way he slow plays. He lulls defenders. What I mean by that is there's tapes, games where he comes up and you have a blocker coming up and he's got 2 defenders and he kind of almost like he's tiptoeing and all of a sudden he sees an angle or a crease and he bursts through it and he breaks the arm tackle. So very powerful runner, a guy who definitely likes to punish defenders. You see him finish his runs and he enjoys. When I say enjoys, he enjoys lowering his shoulder and punishing defensive backs, linebackers, whoever decides to come up and try and tackle him. He'll let you know that he was there. And in terms of a pass catcher, we talked about earlier, guys that are pass catchers. This guy had 35 receptions. He's a natural coming out of the backfield, runs, I've seen him run wheel routes. I've seen him run, routes out to the flat. So this guy is definitely someone that's being used similar to something that you can kind of project, and as he gets into the NFL. So definitely a guy that will be able to dual threat. Now, the one thing about him is, can he create on his own? Sometimes you see him in the open field, he's not really that elusive. For a guy that with that type of quickness, I expected him to be a little more elusive. Sometimes I see his outside vision as being a little shaky at best. There are times where you see alleys kind of developing, and he just didn't bounce it to the outside. And also he gets a little bit upright when he gets in between traffic and takes a lot of shots. I feel like unnecessary shots to the torso, to the chest. So I like to see him just, be able to run behind his pads a little bit better. But again, these are just things that I can see him improving on, as the season goes on.
Yeah, without question. So moving on to number 7 is Najee Harris. Definitely knew I'd see this name on your list out of Alabama. 12 carries, 52 yards this week. No catches for him. Your thoughts on Najee, Danny?
Again, another in the line of talented running backs coming out of Alabama. This one, Najee Harris is a little bit different in terms of body type to the ones we've just kind of talked about previously. He's a little more of a taller runner. He's got good size. He's about 6'1", 6'2", 220-some pounds. But he's a powerful runner. He runs hard. He's a downhill, power back. He's another guy who seeks and enjoys contact. But what I like about him is for a bigger back, he possesses some of that shiftiness. He has some of that lateral agility to be able to bounce around to the outside. He's got good play strength. I like the way he has a nasty stiff arm, and you see him continuously when he takes a run to the outside. You see him continuously, that stiff arm bearing defensive backs into the ground with that stiff arm. He loves to hurdle. I mean, this kid, you put on a tape of him, and there's like at least 1 or 2 hurdles a game. So wow. Shane, smartest man in the bar room, is a big Alabama fan. I was hoping he was on the chat room, and ask him what's up with that? Why is he always like hurdling guys? But yeah, you put on his tape, he's always hurdling. Something he's going to have to get over if he gets into the NFL, because he's going to get hurt that way. But ball security as well, I love about him. No fumbles in his career. So again, like I said earlier, another in the line of talented 4- and 5-star recruits that Nick Saban just produces over Alabama.
There's no question about that. I mean, you see it year over year. Number 8 on your list, Danny, J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State. 21 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown. 1 catch, 14 yards, and no touchdowns in the receiving game. What do you think about J.K. Dobbins?
Man, it feels like J.K. Dobbins is playing at Ohio State for such a long time, but it's only 2017. He became only the 6th true freshman to start a season opener for Ohio State. So another guy with the low center of gravity, got that bounce in his legs, strong lower body. For a guy who's got that stop and go ability, I see him more as a downhill runner. He's a guy that gets behind his pads and just plows through defenders. So kind of surprising for a guy with that size, about only 5'9", 210, but definitely a strong runner. A guy that I definitely is a dual threat out of the backfield. I've seen him run wheel routes. I've seen him, turn on that Northwestern tape from last year, the Big Ten championship game, where he makes a heck of a catch in the end zone. Actually, I tweeted it out last night, where not only does he show his hands, but also his body control to be able to adjust and contour to the ball that was slightly behind him and above his head. Makes a terrific catch out of the backfield. So again, though, this is a guy that if you project towards the NFL, that small frame, not a bell cow runner, really hasn't carried the load. So I see him more as a guy that you probably put in with when you're looking at the next level as a committee, someone who's going to share carries with another running back, but definitely a kid that's talented and not only quick but also very powerful.
Number 9 on your list, Kennedy Brooks out of Oklahoma. 4 carries, 48 yards, no touchdowns, no catches this last week, or the first week, I should say. Now, he was a USA Today freshman All-American. Your thoughts on Kennedy Brooks, Danny?
Yeah, Kennedy Brooks is a cat that I was kind of struggling with. I mean, like I said, he's not a bell cow. He doesn't carry the load at Oklahoma. He splits carries with Trey Sermon at Oklahoma. He's a talented kid. And there's nothing really special about him. I mean, he doesn't really pop out in terms of, being able to make you miss in the open field, any quick twitch ability or anything like that. But what he does is he's just a patient, solid, smooth downhill runner. And a name that popped up or a game that kind of popped up to me in my mind in comparing him to an NFL player. Again, when I say this, I'm not saying he's going to turn into this player. I just say his running style kind of reminds me of Matt Forte, in which he, is nothing flashy, but lo and behold, every time the ball is given to Forte, he's 10, 15, 8, 9, yards downfield, and he's got this subtle hip swivel where he doesn't necessarily juke guys, but he can change directions on the fly, on the run, without slowing down, and be able to get an angle on a defender and get extra yardage. So he's a kid that's very talented. He's got some off the field issues. Some domestic stuff that was brought up against him. So supposedly he's been cleared. So things like that's gonna have to be cleared up. But just based off of his running ability, his style, again, not flashy, nothing pops at you. He's not a 4.3 guy, a 4.4 guy. He's not slow by any means. He's probably like a 4.5 guy if I have to guess. But just a solid running back and just looks smooth.
It's funny you bring up Matt Forte. I hadn't seen him on Twitter much. And then the Zeke Elliott deal gets released today, and his tweet was, "I came up at the wrong time."
Yeah, I think I said that was born too early or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. Just a funny statement. Seeing the Zeke Elliott deal come on. So we've hit number 10 on your list, Danny, out of Cincinnati. Michael Warren, the second, 15 carries, 92 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 27 yards, a touchdown. What do you think of Michael Warren?
Yeah, this is another kid that I don't know how many people know about him, but another tough, stocky, bowling ball type of a running back. But this kid's got that plant and go, cut on a dime ability, super, super quick feet. He can make defenders miss inside the tackle box. So if a defender gets penetration and he's past the line of scrimmage, he can stop and cut and make the guy miss and continue on his path. So for a guy with that powerful, that type of build, to have that type of quickness is, you don't see it every day. So that's one of the things that are really attracting me to Michael Warren. Again, he's a guy that does a nice job of catching balls out of the backfield. So he, potentially could be a dual threat option. He's got, solid speed. He doesn't have the home run breakaway speed that we talked about earlier with, ETN or, Jonathan Taylor or even, DeAndre Swift, but he's got the ability to get chunks, when you mean like, 15, 20, 25 yards a carry. And this week, we mentioned it earlier when we were talking to Kevin McGuire. This week he takes on Ohio State. It's going to be a big show me matchup for him. If he can do well against, a talented Buckeye, team, they might not be, in terms of defensive rating. I don't know what they are right now. Again, it's only been 1 week, but
right.
If he can go up against a big, top 5 opponent and do well, that's really going to help elevate his stock, not only, amongst the fans, but also amongst some of those NFL scouts.
Yeah, Danny, I want a matchup of Ohio, so that'll be a one to watch for all the Ohio fans for sure. And what a great top 10 running back list, Danny. Excited for all those prospects. A great show we had tonight. A great job, Danny, with your top 10 running backs. And we want to thank our guest, Kevin McGuire, for all of his great insight on the show tonight. And to everyone who listened live and joined us in the chat, we hope you enjoyed this week's show. If you can't join us live, we want to remind you that you can find the podcast of Draft on Tap the morning after the live show on all of your favorite podcast streams. Thank you to Eldo Gandia for holding down the Ford Engineering for us tonight as well. And a big shout out to everyone at Bears Barroom, who continues to make the network the number one network for college football, Bears talk, movies, television, sports betting, whatever it is you're looking for, you can find it right here on Bears Barroom Radio Network. And join us next Thursday right here for the next episode of Draft on Tap. Have a great night, everybody.